Hello, welcome to the Ain't No Fang podcast with Arizona Sports, the local sports leader. I'm Alex Weiner, and joining us is Kellan Olson, our Suns expert, Diamondbacks watcher, appreciator, growing expert, and let's do this thing because the Diamondbacks went into Dodger Stadium and did something that they haven't done since 2018, and that is to win a regular season series there. They have now won 4 out of 5 games at Dodger Stadium, dating back to the postseason last year, and they now enter the 50-game mark at 24-26. Right around 500, kind of where you would hope to be given everything that they've had to battle this season. So let's get into what they were able to do this past week, because it felt like a relatively big series win for them, not just because it's the big bad Dodgers, but because it's a good team. They went up against 2 of their best starting pitchers, and they walk out of there with a series win. And mind you, no Zach Gallen and no Jordan Montgomery pitched for them in this series. So, Kellan, what stood out to you most about their series victory at Chavez Ravine this week?
Yeah, I think that's where I want to start, and we should start, is that this was not one of those series where on paper you look at the probables going into the series where you would have thought the Diamondbacks had much of a chance in it. It's what makes baseball so beautiful in so many ways, because you've got an opener coming in, and then you got Ryan Nelson against Glasnow, who's been awesome this year, and you sort of just have your expectations set for how the game is going to go. But the game went another direction. I thought that Nelson yesterday was superb. I think that Ryan, over the course of his young Diamondbacks career so far, has shown that the ceiling for how he can pitch on any given night is pretty darn high. It's just about him finding the consistency that he does. Torrey using openers twice in this series, both worked out, at least initially at the start of the games. And I think that offensively, let me know if you agree, but this started to feel a bit more like last year's team, where it wasn't just like a flurry randomly. Mm-hmm. Like in the third inning yesterday, they score the 3 runs. Corbin has the 2 RBI triple. I'm sure we'll talk about him in a bit. It's like 3 triples in 5 games now for him. Nice to see some extra base hits come together for him. But he scores on the wild pitch. And then in my mind, I'm like, all right, like, can the bullpen and the pitching hold on from here? Because I'm kind of expecting the offense to end. But then you get a Ketel homer, you get a Christian homer. Christian scores on a pass ball, and they're adding up runs, and they're adding up runs in a way that they did in the past, which is like a walk and a single, like just extra small little stuff, and then a couple extra base hits here and there, and then they produce offense. Did it feel like last year more to you? Because that's my biggest takeaway, I think. Yeah, it did. And, that's a huge part of what makes this thing go, right, is the ability to up and down the lineup, have guys come in, and, maybe you don't have a ton of power in the bottom of the lineup, but you have guys who can be really just tough to deal with, work at bats, get on base. And what Kevin Newman has done for them in the 9-hole cannot be overstated these past couple of weeks as far as kind of stabilizing this lineup. That and the fact that Corbin Carroll is now starting to get going a little bit. It's not like he's going 5 for 5 in these games, but he's got a 5-game hitting streak. He's got extra base hits in 4 out of the 5 games. We're starting to see him drive the ball a little bit more, even if it's not quite his, dominant self quite yet. So just having, and to your other point, they didn't score 6 runs in the first inning and then stop. And then slowly the Dodgers come back, and then you kind of have a situation that we've seen plenty of times this year. It's been throughout the game, and it's been throughout the lineup. I mean, in their win on Tuesday night, every single starter in the lineup recorded at least 1 hit. Everybody was contributing. And in last night's game and Wednesday's game, the finale, they... it took them a few innings off of Glasnow to really get going. They score 3 in the 5th inning, I believe it was, when Corbin Carroll breaks through with the triple. And then it doesn't stop there. They're able to get a little bit of late slug from Ketel Marte and Christian Walker. They add on, they tack on, and they make sure that there's no possibility for a comeback. So, yeah, it's been a huge week. I mean, when you look at the weekend series against the Tigers, which couldn't have gone any worse, those first 2 games, big win on Sunday for them to pull it out. You go to Monday, the Dodgers game, it gets away from you in that 1 inning. Then they still kind of piece it together, though, and make it a competitive game and nearly come back if that Ketel Marte, 117-mile-an-hour line drive doesn't get snagged by Mookie Betts. Who knows? They may be able to tie that game at some point. So it just feels like it's been more cohesive throughout the lineup. And, to the pitching point, they go into the Dodgers series. It's Yamamoto versus an opener. They go with Mantiply before Slade Cecconi. Gavin Stone against Brandon Ffaadt, and then it's the opener again, but versus Tyler Glasnow. Huge by both openers to kind of get out of that first inning. I know Hughes didn't finish the first inning, but they do their job, and then it kind of gives the young starters an opportunity there. Now, Nelson does a really well job, like you said.
Slate Ciccone struggles in one inning, kind of does a decent job getting through the rest of the game, but that ends up leading to his option. Now they have an open spot in that rotation, Kellan, and I mean, this sort of is going to be kind of the deal for them as far as their pitching is as many injuries as it has. But now that they have an open rotation spot, do you expect them to go more openers? Any bullpen game? Are they going to call up somebody? What do you think?
I think this is where I'll redirect it back to you, and you can give us the updates on Merrill, but more specifically Erod. Erod is the guy we're expecting to come back first before the two of those. I think that the opener thing is something that they can turn to intermittently, and I think I'm okay with it. I think that what Torrey is sort of either maybe stumbled upon is maybe the right way to put it, because obviously the lefty thing at the start of the Dodger games, you're looking to neutralize, like just get one clean run through those lefties at the top of Ohtani and Freeman and sort of go from there and allow the younger guys to kind of come in at a more level place where they're not facing three of the best hitters of this generation, like right off the bat. So potentially that's something that he turns to a little bit more consistently now for those guys. Like those guys start the game in the second or the third inning instead. I think it's more of differentiating it between, is it going to be an opener or is it going to be a bullpen game? And I think it's still going to be openers for the most part. I think that something that has really helped with this decision-making has been Brandon Ffaadt over the last couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. He has really stumbled into some consistent form. I think I'll put it as he was someone who in the playoffs, we saw it. We know what happened last year during the regular season, very highly thought of prospect, doesn't look good in the regular season. And then in the playoffs, takes the flashes that worked in the regular season and puts those through. Started this year, kind of looking like, okay, maybe it'll be more of a mix like we expected. But this guy in the last couple of starts for him especially has been getting to 6 or 7 innings nearly every start in the last month here, and has just been looking more and more like the guy that, one, was the highly thought of prospect, and two, the guy that he was in the postseason as well. And to your point on like this weird situation they're in right now with like, how do they fill this spot in the meantime when they're waiting for guys to come back from injury? The biggest thing that can happen is Ffaadt pitching like this, because if he can just find some level of consistency here with the spotlight being this high on him, if Erod comes, or when Erod comes back, I should say, and then when Merrill comes back, if Ffaadt is just pitching a little bit worse than this, that's pretty good for a number 4. Mm-hmm. And he's pitching right now like a top 2 guy in a rotation. So they've just really been fortunate for him to find this role that he's been on in May right now, when their staff is like at its lowest in terms of the guys that they don't have available right now.
Yeah, it can't be overstated what he's doing. I mean, 5 quality starts in a row, and sure, it's like, okay, what do we look at as far as pitching stats? With the quality start, at least that tells me that he's giving his team a chance to win. And for 5 straight games, and I think it's like 6 out of the last 7, he has been doing that, and it's been pretty consistent. And he goes on these runs during these games where he can just get on a roll. Against the Reds, he doesn't give up a hit until the 5th inning. Against the Dodgers this week, he doesn't give up a hit until the 4th inning. And they're quick. He's not walking that many hitters much at all. And so when that happens, 3 up, 3 down, get it back to the offense. 3 up, 3 down, get it back to the offense. And when you can get like on that kind of a roll, it really gives them good opportunities to get out ahead. And yeah, he's been a pretty calm and collected figure. I mean, to be able to do what he did in the postseason showed a lot of maturity from somebody that age who hasn't been on that stage before. And this year, he feels like the exact same type of guy. So that's been huge. Going towards the offensive part of this, and this is kind of an interesting conversation because Ketel Marte extended his hitting streak to 21 games. That is tied for the 4th longest in team history with Danny Bautista. He's 3 back from Tony Womack at 3rd, who has 24-game hit streak. Paul Goldschmidt has 26. Luis Gonzalez has 30. So only 9 more games, and Ketel feels about as equipped as anybody to keep this going, considering he's a switch hitter. And yeah, I know, I've seen it. It's like a lot of these have been 1 for 4, 1 for 3 type games. He's still scorching the ball. Last couple of games, he's hit that 117 mile an hour line drive. He hit one to the warning track. He's hitting the ball hard, and they're not all falling, but enough of them are for him to keep this going. So this is a pretty astounding feat for him to have gotten 21 games. And it got me thinking, okay, he had such a huge he had such a huge role for them in the postseason last year. he has been easily their best offensive player this season. There's been multiple years that he has been their best offensive player in the post-Paul Goldschmidt era. Where does he kind of stack up now that we're kind of looking at him like, okay, Gonzo has the best hitting streak, then it's Goldie, and now Ketel's trying to climb that ladder. When you look at sort of like the Mount Rushmore, I guess, of Diamondbacks position players, is he getting to be on that list? Is he already on that list? I put this in the poll the other day on the website to see what the people who went on our website said about it. A lot of them felt like he is a top 5 position player, but not necessarily player in total. Where do you stand on this?
It's an interesting question. It's been really fun to watch the hitting streak because you just often think of a hitting streak in a certain way, and this hasn't been one where you watch his at-bats and you would just figure, again, with how he's hitting the ball, with how he's working counts, he's just been in this rhythm all year, and it's accentuated by this consistency that he's found over the last month. But his batting average has gone down 18 points over the streak, which is just the weirdest part about it. But the extra base hits have been there more recently with the homer last night. And then I think that, again, like you said, when you're watching him play, he just looks like a guy completely in rhythm. And you would assume that this hitting streak is one of those where he's hitting like 400 or 450. To your question on position players, it's something that I would have to really sit down with and like evaluate the guys that have to be there. So like Gonzo and Goldie are obviously on there. So half the list is already gone. I think that he is someone who is approaching that level of consistency. I think that it's how long his career can go on for, and if he can reach the heights of 2019 one or two more times. Like this year, especially in April, I was like, oh my gosh, 2019 Ketel is here. This is the greatest thing, because that's the guy that the D-backs need, especially with how Corbin is playing, because Corbin was such a no-doubter instant star last year that everyone, rightfully so, came into this year just assuming he was going to be a star again. And now that he's playing this way, and again, he's been better lately, it looks like things are slowly coming together for him. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of if he can speed up that process, because we're in late May. But with that being said, I think they don't have a star without him. It's something you have to just say out loud. It sounds stupid, but it's simple and obvious. So they need other big-time contributions. I think Christian's had a pretty steady year all year. But Ketel playing this way has just completely helped in not neutralize the effect of Corbin hitting like this, but has certainly helped. And I think if Ketel can be this guy for 2 or 3 more years, I think that he really starts to become someone that has to be mentioned there. I think if you think of like other really long tenured guys, because that's where I go, because you have Gonzo's impact, you have Goldie's, like Goldie had the consistency as well that's there. But like, I think of like J-Up, I think of even like someone like AJ, like guys like AJ Pollock and Dave Peralta, just because of how long they were around. Is there any other infielder that comes to mind? Because I'm thinking of like second baseman and shortstop. Like they've had some great, like Gene Segura led the league in hits one year. That was awesome, but it was like a little blip that was there. The Mark Reynolds power era was super fun. At shorts, Stephen Drew had some sneaky good years, but like I'm really grasping at straws here already, I think Matt
Williams for infielders, but you know, he was amazing as a Giant for such a long time and very good for the Diamondbacks those first couple years. But he was, you know, getting towards the end of his career when he was with the Diamondbacks. And as far as infielders, I don't, other than Goldschmidt, there's no one really who stands out to me who would, you know, potentially, you know, keep Ketel down on the list necessarily, because Ketel, you're right, the 2019 season was among the best we've ever seen from a Diamondbacks player. So he has that high, that's part of it, and he has the longevity, because it's amazing to think about it, because he's been a young player for so much of this, but this is his 8th season with the Arizona Diamondbacks, and the games aren't quite like top 5 in Diamondbacks history yet, because you had 2020 and because he had some injury stuff, but I think there's a real argument to make, and obviously this will play out the next however many years. He's under contract for a little while longer.
I will add, I just looked this up. So WAR among position players, all-time D-backs history, Goldie and Gonzo pretty separated. Ketel's already in 3rd.
Yeah.
AJ Pollock behind him, Finley, Peralta, Walker, Young, but Marte's at 24.6 and AJ Pollock's at 18.7. So he's like really separated himself in that like one like statistic, that one analytical perspective. But production-wise, that statistic seems to indicate he's pretty much already there.
Yeah.
And maybe we're overlooking it a bit. It's a good point, Mr. Weiner.
Yeah, I saw that because I saw he's almost 5th. Like he's almost caught up to Curt Schilling for that 5th spot. And then, you look at some offensive stuff. In average, he's 6th. In on-base percentage, he's 7th. In slugging, he's 5th. And all this kind of stuff. He's just like a top 5 offensive player for them in just about everything at this point. And there's years to go. So it's something to keep an eye on, because I feel like for Ketel, it's, it's such a high in 2019 that it felt like it was a little bit of a lull. A lot of that was health reasons and because 2020 was so weird. But yeah, he probably should have been an all-star last year. Doesn't get there, but he wins NLCS MVP. He has a 20-game hit streak in the postseason. Now he's most certainly going to be an all-star this year. So it's something to think about as far as his standing, as far as being one of the best Diamondbacks that we've ever seen. And yeah, you're right. It's a huge reason why they've been able to stay afloat, is because of the offense that he's been able to provide for them, given the struggles not only for Corbin, but for Lourdes Gurriel and for Eugenio Suarez and Gabriel Moreno, guys who you'd expect to finish the season with much better numbers than they have right now. But, you need guys like Ketel Marte and a couple of breakouts like a Kevin Newman to keep you afloat in the meantime. So definitely something to keep an eye out. He will go for number 22 on Friday when the Diamondbacks are back against the Miami Marlins. Just to kind of go over, again, the 50-game mark, they are 24-26. That is half a game back of the Giants for 3rd in the NL West, a game and a half back of the Padres for 2nd. The standings are very cluttered in the National League. Something that definitely works in their favor is the fact that the NL has been really, really top heavy. I mean, the Phillies, the Dodgers, the Braves have all been really good. The Brewers have been surprisingly very good, given everybody that they lost in the offseason. But after that, it's just this chunk of teams that are, 3 games over 500 to 5 games below 500. And it's going to be kind of a dogfight here to see who stays in that group, who falls off of that group, and they're right in the thick of it. So that's kind of a pretty decent spot to be in, given everything that they've had to deal with all season long, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that right now, just looking at the standings as a whole, there are 7 or 8 teams right now in Major League Baseball who have kind of separated themselves from everyone else. The Cleveland Guardians, one of them, Mr. Weiner.
I know
about that. But looking at the schedule specifically, Miami, Texas, who's a couple games under 500, the Mets, and then a huge start to June with 7 games against the Giants and the Padres. Those are 2 teams that they're fighting with for that wild card spot right now, including the Mets as well. But it's the Angels, the White Sox, the Nats, who have been surprisingly decent. But then the Phillies on June 21st. So you are essentially, after this Dodgers series, Alex, going a full month without playing any of these marquee teams, the teams that have separated themselves to this point. I said it on the radio a couple of days ago. I think that by the end of May, I wanted to see this team above 500, but I think I'm more so looking at that late June, by that Phillies series on June 21st, basically a full month from now. What I want to see is them a couple of games above 500 and sort of stabilize is always a word that I come back to in situations like this, but just starting to look like themselves again, like just starting to not only produce wins, because as I covered a Phoenix Suns team this year, I covered a Phoenix Suns team that won a lot of games because they just knew how to win, but they weren't really that great on the court. Like that's okay. That's baseball basically, right? Like you can win ugly a lot in baseball and be okay for the most part. And I think that that's something that I want to see them do more of, which I think they've done this year, but they can certainly do over this next month stretch. And then what are the injury updates, Alex? We should share those with the listeners before we go, because Jerry, our boy, I don't know if you've told this to people on the podcast yet, but you and I, for all the Perdomo fan club, number 1 and number 2, ever since he got here. Alec Thomas had the injection a couple weeks ago. Where's Erod? Where's Marillac? Give us the updates.
Sure. So Perdomo, it looks like by the end of the month, and obviously we'll learn more and we'll update everybody. The Diamondbacks are back at Chase Field on Friday, so there will be plenty of updates throughout the weekend as we continue to learn more. But yeah, the thinking for Perdomo is that by the end of May, he will be potentially back in this lineup, which would be huge. It'll give them sort of a platoon option, at least at first, with Newman. Perdomo's been a growing leader for this team. A really, really stubborn at bat in the bottom of the lineup to lengthen the lineup. So somebody to watch out for as far as like within the next like week, maybe a little longer, but we'll see if it's actually at the end of May or if it's a little bit into June. But it's soon. It's soon. It's within like a week or so, or maybe in a week or so, something along those lines. It won't be too long. For Alec Thomas, yeah, he had the injection, getting at bats. It's just about being able to run on your full weight. Torey Lovello said during the last weekend that he expected Perdomo to be back before Thomas, but it doesn't sound like, for Thomas, it's just how he feels whenever he's like out there running, really. And so there's a little bit of mystery there with the injection, but it doesn't seem like it'll be too much longer. Eduardo Rodriguez is throwing. That's good. Next step is to get him on a mound. And then Merrill Kelly, I saw from reports in Los Angeles that he was going to have an MRI, and if all was clean, he could potentially start throwing pretty soon too. So mostly pretty positive, given where they've been at this point. So yeah, that's sort of what we're looking at. It seems like within the next, week and a half, something like that at least they'll have one of those big four back. But yeah, so,
and gosh, I think I think that there's going to be like all right, here we go kind of momentum that starts like, okay, the team that we were so hyped about for all the offseason and like we were incredibly excited for this run of baseball. I think that not only is the city going to get a sense of momentum when this team's fully healthy, but the team itself is going to be like, all right, we've messed around enough, like diddling and daddling around this wild card spot. Like, let's separate ourselves as the National League champions, and I expect them to do that.
Yeah, and I'm sure it would be a huge boost of energy to get even one of these guys back, even when Perdomo gets back, because he's somebody who's such a huge clubhouse presence that, and you're right, this should be a huge opportunity for them. You mentioned them being above 500 by the end of May. If they take care of business against the Marlins, they have a good series against the Giants, they could be right there. So yeah, definitely something to watch out for. And when they play the Marlins, it's going to be Gallen and then Montgomery. I mean, there's not a lot of excuses for them to not at least win this series at home. So yeah, that starts Friday. Zach Gallen versus Jazz Chisholm, whatever it is at this point since the trade. Something to watch out for. I think Chisholm is 0 for 9 against Zach Gallen at this point. So
one of my worst takes I've ever said on the radio is that remember when Gallen was kind of fine for like a year, and then he was awesome after that during like the fine year. But pre-Strom, was that year one was Strom? I can't remember. I went on the radio and it was like, well, Jazz is an all-star. Like, I think they lost this trade, but that's fine. And that has not aged particularly well. They've definitely won this trade. Gallen's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at the value from that trade, I think it's like 16 WAR to 6 WAR. And yes, Chisholm came up later. He has had some injury stuff. I think it's mostly been a pretty decent trade for both sides, considering where both players were at the time of the trade. But yeah, that's definitely one where you come out versus Arizona and you're like, you do that 100 times out of 100. So that's a matchup to watch for over the weekend. Marlins, Diamondbacks back at Chase Field. Opportunity to go back up over 500. That'll be on Arizona Sports and 98.7, the Arizona Sports app, all the places where you go usually listen to Diamondbacks games. And so, Kellan, thank you so much for jumping on Ain't No Fang. I'm Alex Weiner, and keep it locked in, Arizona Sports, for all things Arizona Diamondbacks.